My name is Claire Matthews, 21 years old, a junior majoring in biology at the University of Central Florida, and for the longest time, I thought the worst thing that ever happened to me was surviving 3 months in the ICU after that car crash. But no, the real nightmare didn't begin until I came home. That day, I left the hospital on crutches, my legs still not fully extended, body stitched and bruised all over. The nurse handed me a discharge envelope and a $50 taxi voucher. All I wanted was to go back to that quiet little cul-de-sac in Winter Park, the White House with the lavender pot my mom kept on the windowsill. I had clung to that dream during the long, paralyzed nights in the hospital, imagining waking up to the smell of warm pastries and the low hum of the TV in the living room. But the second the driver turned down our familiar street, I knew something was wrong. Where my house once stood was now just a bare lot. No porch, no maple tree dropping its fiery leaves. Just red dirt and a sign staked into the earth like a tombstone. Future site of Cypress Estates. Advanced Realty Development. I opened the door and stumbled out. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "You okay, miss?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at the flattened earth like someone had bulldozed my entire memory into the ground. The old dented mailbox was still there, the last survivor, as if it had stayed behind, watching, waiting for me to return, only to find nothing left to return to. I pulled out my phone, called Mom, no signal, called Dad, dead tone. I tried Emma, my cousin, who'd brought white tulips to the hospital. The message marked delivered, but not read. I opened my banking app. A cold message flashed on screen, account frozen. Pending guardian verification. I checked Venmo. Balance $0.2. I sank onto the cold slab of concrete where our front steps used to be. Everything I once believed was safe family, home. Money had just been stripped away like a second skin. Then I remembered weeks before the accident. My mom had been taking late-night phone calls, tense ones. When I asked, she just said, real estate stuff with an old friend. I didn't think much of it. But now, Vance Realty, that name on the sign, felt like a blade slicing straight into my memory. I had heard Dad mutter something about that bastard Vance during one especially quiet dinner, while Mom sat stone-faced the entire time. I tapped my phone again and called Aunt Carol, Mom's younger sister, the one who used to say I was the only light left in this family. She picked up, after a few rings. "Claire." Her voice cracked. "Oh my God. Baby, you're home." I nodded, even though my throat burned. "And Carol, our house is gone." She went silent, then whispered, "Get in that car and come here. I've got a room ready." "But Claire, your parents have done things they never meant for you to find out." I ended the call with my hands trembling, my heart pounding with just one question. How long have they been planning to erase me from their lives? And why? I didn't have any luggage, just a hospital file folder, a dying phone, and an oversized hoodie the nurse gave me at discharge. I got into the Uber Aunt Carol had ordered from her own account. It took nearly 30 minutes to get to her home on the west side of Orlando, a small, low-roofed ranch house with a neatly trimmed lawn and a beagle named Rusty who barked his head off the moment I stepped through the gate. Aunt Carol hugged me tight. She was short, her hair silver gray, and she smelled like peppermint and cinnamon, the scent I used to associate with holidays as a kid. The last time I'd been in this house was Christmas, 2 years ago. Back then, my mom had said, Don't talk to Carol too much. She's always getting into things that don't concern her. Now, I hope that woman who got into things was the only one still concerned about me. Have you eaten? She asked, pulling me gently toward the kitchen. I shook my head. She poured me a glass of orange juice and set a steaming bowl of soup on the table. I sipped spoonful after spoonful, shivering from hunger and panic, trying to keep the rising dread from spilling over. When I finished, she handed me a blanket and sat across from me, her voice turning serious. Do you know when your parents sold the house? I shook my head. Second week after the accident. The doctors called to say you were out of critical condition. They signed the paperwork just a few days later. I froze. They didn't tell anyone. No one. They told the neighbors they were moving closer to your grandparents in Georgia. But, she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. There is no Georgia. They disappeared. I bit my lip, forcing myself to stay calm. And what about my bank account? They froze everything and just emptied it. I can't say for sure, but probably. You were still under medical guardianship. They had access. I nodded slowly. Things were starting to come together, the failed calls to the bank, the access denied messages, the documents I never even saw. But the thing I couldn't piece together was why. I whispered. I thought I was their daughter. Aunt Carol gently clasped my hand. Claire, there's something you need to know. Your mom reconnected with someone from the past, about 6 months before the accident, a man named Caleb Vance. I snapped my head up. Vance? She nodded. Yep. Same name from that sign on your old lot. I straightened in my chair, a burning sensation rising in my throat. Who is he? He used to be a real estate broker. Got investigated for investment fraud a while back, from what I've heard. He and your mom knew each other from high school. Then nothing for years, until your dad started hitting money trouble. And she reached out to him again. You mean my mom was seeing him? She hesitated, then said quietly, possibly. And he very likely orchestrated the house sale. My grip tightened around the spoon in my hand. It trembled, not from fear this time, from rage, from betrayal. Do you have an address for him? A number? Anything? She shook her head. No, but if you want, I can take you to the county records office. Every real estate transaction's on file there. I nodded. Tomorrow, first thing. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes a mix of worry and admiration. You sure about this, Claire? This isn't just about a house. This is... I cut her off. My eyes locked on the glass of orange juice in front of me. This is about justice. Not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been stabbed in the back by their own family when they were at their weakest. That night, I slept in the room that once belonged to Aunt Carol's daughter, long gone now. The walls were lined with floral wallpaper, the lighting soft. But inside me, a storm was coiling tighter and tighter. I opened Carol's old laptop and started digging Caleb Vance, Vance Realty, public transaction records, financial guardianship. Every link, every name, I wrote it all down. I wasn't the girl who had just woken up from a coma anymore. I was Claire Matthews, and I was going to chase this all the way to the end. The next morning, I woke up at 6. My head was heavy from a night of relentless Googling. Aunt Carol brewed coffee and handed me a peanut butter sandwich before driving me to the Orange County Property Records office. No one asked questions we walked in like any regular folks researching land. But to me, every step inside was a blade slicing closer to the truth. At the records desk was a woman named Gina, maybe in her 40s. Blonde hair tied neatly, friendly but sharp-eyed. I told her I wanted to pull all transactions related to my family's old address on Colonial Drive. She asked why. I kept it short. That was my home. And I believe financial fraud occurred while I was hospitalized. She looked me over, then gave a subtle nod, like she understood more than I said. "You're Matthews." I nodded, not even 10 minutes later. She came back with a file. Sale agreements, transfer authorizations, notarized documents, signatures. And just as I suspected, the seller's name was Rebecca Matthews, my mother, the buyer Caleb Vance, representing Vance Realty, LLC. There was a notarized power of attorney form stating the reason for the sale as financial hardship due to medical expenses. The signing date. 9 days after I was admitted to the ICU, I clutched the paper, dizziness sweeping over me. But it didn't stop there. I flipped through more pages. A payment addendum listed a large deposit wired from Vance Realty to an account under the name R. Matthews and Associates, a company I'd never heard of, and I knew my mother didn't own any business. I asked Gina if she could dig up anything on R. Matthews and Associates. She shook her head. It's registered as a consulting firm, but no staff, no physical office. It's likely a shell company. I knew what that meant. They used an empty entity to clean the money trail. Can I get a full copy of these records? Gina gave me a long look. Her expression shifted from curious to cautious. I can print it for you, but be careful. Transactions like these, they usually come with messy stories. I gave her a faint smile. I've seen messy. It's time to clean it up. We left the building around noon. Aunt Carol stayed quiet most of the ride back. It wasn't until I had packed away the files that she finally spoke. "Claire, do you really think your mom did all this for the money I didn't answer right away?" In my mind, I saw the woman who used to teach me how to knit scarves in winter, who once stayed up all night fixing my prom dress after the zipper broke. But I also remembered her eyes lately colder, distant, the whispered phone calls, the way she avoided my gaze. At that moment, I said slowly, she had two choices: save her daughter or save herself. And she chose herself. And Carol shook her head, sadness pulling at her features. If that's true, then she lost more than just a house. That night, I kept digging. I looked deeper into Caleb Vance. Old news clippings showed he'd been sued for pushing fake housing developments in Jacksonville. His real estate license had been suspended for 3 years. Former clients called him a manipulator, polished, someone who knows how to seduce and exploit the vulnerable. And then I found a photo, him and my mother, standing together at a black tie gala in Miami. 2 months before my accident, my blood ran cold. They weren't just connected. They were together. While I was lying in a hospital bed, they were dressing up, drinking champagne, posing for photos, planning to erase me. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. I opened Evernote and typed just one line. They don't get to live in peace. Not while I'm still breathing. I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew one thing: if I wanted to expose them, I had to get inside their world. The world of real estate, investment, money, and deception. And I had my first weapon evidence. Next step, infiltration. I started with a fake file built on a real name. Nothing illegal, just my middle name and a temporary address in North Winter Park to enroll in a vocational course titled Introduction to Commercial Real Estate. They didn't ask for much, just an ID and a few $100s in fees. And Carol paid for it. I told her this was the first step toward reclaiming justice. For 6 weeks. I studied like a woman possessed. I devoured property valuation rules, legal documentation analysis, and the maze of LLCs used to dodge taxes and conceal true ownership. I wasn't just studying to pass a test. I was studying to understand exactly how they had erased me from my own home. Every night I came home with bloodshot eyes. But every line in my notebook was another brick in the foundation of my revenge. I began to see Caleb for what he truly was, not just a con man, but the kind of predator who thrives on the laziness of others. And I was done being careless. One evening, while researching a former partner company linked to Vance Realty, I came across the name of a former employee, Hannah Wells, once an internal accountant there. She had resigned following a non-disclosed internal dispute. I tracked her through LinkedIn. It took 3 days of careful digging. She now worked as a financial assistant at a small investment firm called Brighton & Wynn, located on the 3rd floor of a red brick building near downtown Orlando. I showed up, dressed like an eager intern. White button-up shirt, dark jeans, tidy bun, and a warm smile. I didn't ask to meet Hannah. Instead, I submitted an application for an unpaid internship. And I got the position a week later. I was the coffee girl, the copier girl, the invisible one in every meeting. But I listened. I learned fast. I memorized everything: file codes, funding pitches, even how the lawyers worded disclaimers to evade liability. A month in, I finally bumped into Hannah in the elevator. She wore a beige dress, her eyes sharp but perpetually tired. I took a chance. "You're Hannah Wells. I read about the fallout with Vance Realty. Back then, you were right. She looked at me like I just uttered a forbidden name. But then, slowly, she nodded. Who are you, Claire Matthews?" I said, using my real name for the first time since joining Brighton & Wynn. Caleb Vance destroyed my family. And I think you know what that feels like. She didn't say anything. But the next morning, I found an internal envelope left on my desk. No name, just the envelope. Inside was a printed email chain between Caleb and my mother. Attached a PDF file titled RE Liquidation Plan. Remove Claire from access accounts. Digitally signed R. Matthews. C. Vance. I had to leave the office. I ran straight to the restroom to keep from sobbing in front of anyone. My hands clutched the paper so tightly it crinkled under my grip. One sentence in that email knocked the air out of me. As long as Claire remains in ICU, we can proceed. It's cleaner this way. Not betrayal, premeditation. They had waited for the moment I hovered between life and death to quietly take everything. And my mother had been complicit. That night, I called Aunt Carol's lawyer, a seasoned woman named Janice Hammond, who had once worked exclusively with victims of property fraud. I brought every document I had. She turned each page, nodded, not surprised. You have a clear case, she said. But if you want to bring this to court, paperwork won't be enough. What do you mean you need to show motive? Gain, and if possible, proof they believed you'd never wake up. That's what makes this criminal. I looked at her, my eyes no longer naive. They were wrong about one thing, Miss Hammond. And what's that? I smiled, not out of joy, but something harder, sharper. I did wake up. and I'm still here. Back in my room, I picked up a tube of red lipstick and scrawled 3 words across the mirror. Don't forgive them. Because forgiveness was the last thing I had left to give, and I wouldn't waste it on the people who tried to erase me from my own life. The Florida Real Estate Investment Association's Spring Gala was held at the end of April in a luxury hotel downtown Orlando. Brighton & Wynn was a silver sponsor, and I, the unpaid intern, was assigned to assist the delegation, which meant running the projector, organizing handouts, and pouring champagne. A perfect supporting role. I chose a black evening gown, elegant, modest, strategic, hairpinned high, slim frame glasses. I didn't look like the girl who'd limped out of the hospital 3 months ago, or the daughter whose home had been sold out from under her. I didn't need to act like someone else. I had already become her. I arrived at 5:40 p.m., checked the stage lights, skimmed the guest list, and then I saw his name, Caleb Vance, Vance Realty Holdings, table 4. I swallowed hard. My hand clenched around the event iPad. I knew I was ready, but my heart still pounded like war drums. Not from fear, from fury. At 6:10 p.m., Caleb arrived. Same slick silver gray suit, same greased back hair, same smirk like the world was just his private audience. But on his arm, clinging to him, was my mother. She wore a red silk gown, makeup flawless. Her eyes scanned the crowd like she belonged in some royal court. I stood only a few feet from her. She didn't recognize me. Not until I stepped towards the lighting console near the VIP section. Then she turned. Our eyes met. 1 second, 2. Her face shifted. Her eyelids fluttered. Her lips parted, as if to say something. But then she turned away. I walked calmly to the bar and poured myself a glass of champagne. Probably the calmest I had ever looked in a mirror. 8:00 p.m. mid-program. The MC introduced the charity segment. Caleb was one of the key sponsors. He strutted onto the stage and started talking about opportunities for youth, rebuilding communities, and the importance of trust. I couldn't help it. I let out a quiet laugh, sharp, like a blade, freshly honed. After his speech, guests began to leave their tables for the dance floor. I walked straight to table 4. My mother stood before I could even open my mouth. She stammered, "Claire, no, this isn't..." I looked her dead in the eye. My voice cold steel. "Hello, Mom, remember me?" Caleb turned, confused at first, but when I spoke again, his grip tightened around his glass. "I'm Claire Matthews, the daughter you both thought would never wake up." My mom panicked. "This isn't the place." I cut her off. "Not the place? Then where should we talk about? The house sale, the audio file of the account cleanup plan, the email titled, "I see you" is the perfect timing. Should I bring that up on a live broadcast?" Instead, Caleb stepped in, reaching for my arm. "Now hold on, sweetheart. There must be a misunderstanding." I stepped back, pulled out my phone. "I've got the receipts. And trust me, I didn't come here to misunderstand anything." I opened the screen, showing the PDF of the email exchange between him and my mother. His eyes widened in real fear. Around us, guests began to glance over. No one stepped in. Just the gentle jazz music, playing on a loop in the background, mocking. My mother hissed under her breath, "You're ruining yourself." I stared at her. My face was calm, but my voice wasn't that of a daughter begging to be seen. "No, I'm standing up. You sold everything. Your name, your soul, your daughter. And then it happened. A champagne flute shattered. She'd thrown it in my face. The room froze in dead silence. Champagne dripped down my black dress. Cold, sticky. But I didn't wipe it. I just stared at her. I didn't scream. I didn't slap her back. I said just one thing. This time, you don't get to deny it. You're going to pay. Then I turned and walked away from table 4, leaving behind a room buzzing with murmurs. I didn't feel relief, but something had cracked open inside me. Like a door, a beginning. The first shot had been fired, and she, my mother, knew it. 3 days after the gala, my mother filed a lawsuit against me. I received the court summons from a process server while having breakfast at Aunt Carol's. My coffee hadn't even cooled when a thick packet landed on the table. The heading read, "Complaint for harassment, impersonation, and defamation of commercial reputation. Plaintiffs Rebecca Matthews and Caleb Vance, defendant Claire Matthews." I almost laughed, then almost threw up in the filing. They accused me of unlawfully crashing a commercial event, willfully damaging reputations, and using forged documents to issue public threats. They described me as a psychologically unstable individual following a serious accident, and included my hospital records as exhibits. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stared at my mother's name listed under plaintiff. Aunt Carol turned crimson with rage. They think you're weak enough to stay quiet. They don't know who you've become. I called Janice Hammond, my lawyer. She spent 30 silent minutes reading through it. Then finally said, "They're playing dirty. If even one piece of your evidence gets thrown out as inadmissible, the court could dismiss everything, so they're trying to flip the script." I asked, "Not just flip it?" She replied, "They're trying to paint you as the fraud by attacking your weakest point, your accident, your medical history, your mental state. They hope you'll react like a victim. But if you respond like someone who knows the law, that's when they slip." I nodded. "Then let's make them slip." I started gathering more evidence with quiet help from Hannah Wells. She sent me 2 internal audio recordings from Vance Realty. One was a call between Caleb and a business partner, discussing a liquidation account opportunity if Claire doesn't make it. The other, a closed-door meeting. My mother's voice, cold and sharp. "What if the girl wakes up? She's of age now. She could reclaim the assets." Caleb replied, "Not if we get everything moved into RMA first." And my mother, "Then do it fast. I don't want to see her again." That audio sliced through me like a scalpel. I gave it all to Hammond. She stared at the transcripts. "If these hold up, we're not talking civil dispute anymore. We're looking at premeditated asset theft through medical guardianship. That's criminal." The first hearing was scheduled for Monday morning at county court. The room was plain, none of that polished wood and gavel drama you see on TV, just stiff leather chairs and the air of quiet warfare. My mother wore a pale beige suit and sat at the plaintiff's table. Caleb didn't show his attorney, appeared in his place. I walked in beside Hammond, armed with copies of financial records, flowcharts, and audio files. No makeup, no gowns. Just me, Claire Matthews. The girl they tried to write out of her own life. The opposing counsel opened by attacking my credibility. Hospital records show Ms. Matthews suffered traumatic brain injury. We question whether she can clearly distinguish memory from fabrication. Hammond chuckled. And what about their own emails and signatures? Are those imaginary too? We laid out the evidence, every transfer, every timeline, every word from the recordings. They tried to challenge the tapes, claiming the voices weren't identifiable, but digital signatures and company headers from R, Matthews and Associates choked off any rebuttal. The judge, an older woman with eyes like forged steel, asked one question after reviewing the files. Miss Matthews, if what you allege is true, then what is your goal here? Revenge or justice? I took a breath. I don't need my mother to love me anymore. I just need her to never again have the power to steal the life I nearly died trying to keep. The room was silent. Even my mother bowed her head. The judge didn't rule that day. Instead, she ordered a preliminary criminal inquiry to investigate financial misconduct and abuse of medical guardianship. The other attorney looked like the blood had drained straight out of his face. Outside the courthouse, reporters had started to gather. One of them asked, "Do you have anything to say to your mother?" I answered, "She once called me a burden, but now I'm the reason she's being exposed." And Caleb Vance. He still hadn't shown his face. But I knew one thing for sure: he was hiding. And the hunt wasn't over yet. A month after the preliminary hearing, the name Claire Matthews started appearing in local legal news, not as the harasser my mother had hoped, but as the key witness in a criminal investigation into guardianship abuse and family asset theft. The defendants, Rebecca Matthews and Caleb Vance. When the Orange County District Attorney's Office officially opened a criminal case, things began to shift in a direction I never imagined I'd be strong enough to turn. Caleb Vance became a high-priority fugitive, and after 2 weeks on the run, he was caught in Tallahassee, trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with a fake passport under the name Kyle Vanders. He managed to say just one thing to the press as he was extradited back to Orlando. No one thought that girl would ever wake up. One early summer afternoon, I was invited to be a guest on a regional talk show called Justice Unveiled, with a special episode titled When Family Becomes the Betrayer. I nearly declined. I didn't want to turn my trauma into clickbait. But when the host told me there are hundreds of young people who've had their guardianship rights exploited for profit, your story could be the match that lights the fire, I agreed. The segment was filmed in a modest studio in downtown Orlando. On stage, soft white lighting, beige armchairs, and a quiet, attentive audience. I wasn't nervous. I had come too far to be afraid anymore. After a brief intro, they played an audio clip, just a few seconds. It was my mother. During that secret internal meeting, Hannah had recorded, "Claire is a burden. We can't let her come back and claim anything. She's no longer valuable." The room went silent, as if all the air had been sucked out. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked straight into the camera. "That's my mother," I said, and that's how she saw me. A girl who had just survived 3 months in the ICU. The host gently placed a hand on my shoulder, soft but steady. "Claire, what do you want to say to people like her, those who think the law can be bent with enough cruelty?" I pressed my lips together, then looked out at the audience. I don't seek revenge with knives or fire. I seek it with survival, with memory, with evidence, and with the refusal to disappear just because someone decided I was inconvenient. Final results of the investigation: Caleb was convicted of using fraudulent information to illegally seize family assets through a shell company. My mother was charged as a co-conspirator and ordered to repay the full amount funneled through our Matthews and Associates. I didn't reclaim our old house. I didn't need it anymore. Instead, I used the settlement, roughly $240 after taxes and legal fees, to start a fund called the Matthews Foundation. Ironically, the name my mother once used for her shell company. I repurposed it to cover legal expenses for the young people who had been exploited under medical or financial guardianship. People like me. In the beginning, only a few emails trickled in. But by late summer, we had over 40 applications. From across the country, from high schoolers, college students, even coma survivors like me. I rented a small office on the second floor of an old building next to the city library. Nothing fancy. But enough to begin. On my desk, I placed only one frame photo, not of family, but of the house that was demolished, the only picture I had taken the day I returned, and found nothing but dirt. Beneath the frame, I stuck a single line from the place I was erased. I rebuilt myself and my mother. After being sentenced to 18 months of probation, she vanished, deleted all her social media, disappeared from public records. I heard she moved in with distant relatives in Alabama. No one stays in touch with her. She never sent an apology, never asked to see me. I used to hope she'd write, that she'd explain, or at least confess. But eventually, I realized her silence was the confession. My name is Claire Matthews. I lost everything because of the betrayal of the woman who gave birth to me. But I also found myself digging through the rubble of the truth. And if you're reading this, remember, some people will use their power to erase you from their story, but you can write your own with enough courage and not a drop of forgiveness.